Hi guys, Jason here from the Nathaniel School of Music, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk about how you can create a backing track for live performance. So usually in a backing track what you would need are parts which you're not going to perform live, like arpeggiators, synthesizers, sound effects, and so on. Or it could even be instruments which you've recorded in the studio or overdubbed in the studio, which just need to be there live. And it's something which is being done very often, and it's something you should know. If you're a 4 or 5 piece rock band and you're not able to sound as big as you are sounding in the studio, it probably makes sense to incorporate some elements as you go live. And a few things to incorporate are the effects chain, be it reverbs, delays. You could just let a reverb run uh, while you play. Another reason to have a backing track could be to have uh, things like the synthesizers running. So, for example, in this song, I have this sort of stuff going on. So if you'll observe, there are quite a few tracks running, and it's not going to be very easy for all of this to be replicated by one musician. And for all we know, these were arpeggiated parts in the first place. Whenever you've recorded the song, let's say in a software like this, Pro Tools, you have to first figure out the things which you're going to do live. Um, in this case, I obviously want to do the drums live, so I'm going to mute the drum channel completely. I'm obviously going to mute the vocal channel. You can perhaps leave the vocal harmonies, vocal overdubs the way it is, and obviously mute the guitar channel if you're a guitar player. And I'd advise you to use buses so that you send the output to a bus or to an aux track in this case and mute it. So whenever you hear it back, I'm also going to be muting the piano, going to be muting the bass. So the musicians in the show are going to be the keyboard player, the bass player, the drum player, and the vocal player and the guitarist. And all of these tracks are what I have muted. So what I want to do is when the band plays live is to have all the elements which are not part of the live instrument setup. So when I play a section like this, you only hear the pads, and the entire band is going to play to those pads. And similarly, in a section like this, which is like a dubstep part, it has a vocal effects chain. I could even mute that. And essentially, the band plays to this. Now, this could be one of the main reasons you would want a backing track, because you have a lot of elements in your song which you want to bring out at your show. But another obvious reason to perform with a backing track could just be a metronome. So, for instance, I could have everything muted and just have a metronome running at a particular tempo. Now, the way this works is when the whole band needs to play to a metronome, which is currently set at 138 beats per minute, the band is going to hear the metronome count, and that has to probably run through an in-ear monitoring system of some sort. I don't see it being possible to run it through the floor monitors, especially when you're doing a live show in a smaller room like a pub or a smaller restaurant. And a lot of bands these days like to play with metronome. They practice with the metronome in the studios, in the jam rooms, and so on, and they record with a metronome. So I don't see any reason why they shouldn't perform with a metronome. If you're performing with a metronome, uh, what a traditional system would be to have the metronome uh, playing through, let's say, a phone app like Pro Metronome, and plug that into an input channel on the sound console, and the drummer hears that, or the entire band hears that. But if you want to play a backing track, you'll definitely need a metronome, and more importantly, you'll need a metronome along with the backing track, and you'll need that as a file so that the band plays to the metronome as well as to the file. So as you'll see here, so when that arpeggiator started, I don't see how anyone's going to be able to notice that or recognize that as musicians. So having a metronome running is very important. At the same time, the metronome should not run for the audience. You don't want the audience hearing the metronome, since that's not part of your production, and you don't hear it on the record either. So the first and foremost thing when creating a backing track is to always create two versions of it, and this is assuming you're going to go ahead on stage with a metronome. If you go on stage without a metronome, and if you're fine where your loops and all of that stuff is enough to keep you guys on time, you do not need a metronome at all. So this particular case which I'm trying to talk about is when the band goes on stage with a metronome as well as a backing track playing, and the backing track is in reference to the metronome. So to keep it short, what I need to do is export my DAW project from start to end. So if I go, let's say, till the end of my project, which is somewhere here, and then select it all the way to the top, I need to create two renders of this session. I need to create a render without the metronome playing, which is this. And that's basically what I'm going to send to the audience. Now, I'll also need another version for my band to hear. So what I've done here is I've given 8 beats so that everyone's ready to go after 8 counts. 1, 2, 3, and in this rendition, you don't hear the rest of what we recorded. You don't hear the piano and the bass. I'm basically muting all of that because we are going to be playing all of this live. And the stuff which we are not going to play live, or the stuff which we are going to trigger, are the stuff which you're hearing right now. All of this synthy, loopy kind of stuff. So a good practice would be, as I said, go to the end of the project, select till the beginning, make sure it's till the beginning. That's extremely important so that your tempo information is solid. You could also make a note of the tempo for further reference. And after you're done with the whole thing, you need to render out two versions. Render one version with the metronome, which is essentially for yourselves as you go on stage and hear that through the in-ears. And you need one version without the metronome, which is for your audience. And I'll show you guys how you can set that up later. So I'm just going to go ahead now and export both the backing tracks, one with metronome and the other without metronome. So on Pro Tools, the shortcut is Command, Alt and B. And I've called it with click. Let me first confirm if there is click in this one. Yes, there is. It's also good to check the level of the click so that your drummer can easily play along with the rest of the band while hearing the metronome too. So it's quite a simple job. Render, head over somewhere in your computer, and I'm calling this song name with click. As we're reaching the end of the rendering process, it's also important to know that while we're rendering everything we did during the mix and master of the project. The leveling, the limiting, the compression, the reverb, the delay. And I think that's quite a useful feature if you're using a DAW for recording. So I would suggest you do that as a band, because it gets everything into perspective. It also gets it to sound really good with reference to what you're playing. So when you're mixing a song, you're generally hearing the levels of your backing tracks with the sound files which are already there, which you are playing. So a great mix of the two will happen when it's in a DAW session. So do consider doing that, and my suggestion is to not prepare the backing tracks independent of the files which you're using in your show, which are the bass guitar and the drums and so on. So when you're hearing the backing tracks, always hear it with reference to what you're with reference to everything. So if I have drums, so everything is balanced with respect to the other instruments, which is very important. Now the other kind of render which I'll be doing, which will again be from the same point at the end of the project till the very beginning, but in this version I have turned off the metronome. You could either mute it here, or in Pro Tools you can hold down the numpad 7 and it goes off. So I'm sure every software will have a way to enable and disable the metronome. Do use a feature which works. Let's now render the version of the song without the metronome, and yeah, just hang on till this is done. And please note that this is what your audience is going to hear. The one we rendered earlier is what you are going to hear as a band. Right guys, so as the file is about to complete rendering, basically what we would have done is create two versions, one with click and the other without click. And by doing that, the one with click obviously goes to your in-ear monitoring system, and the one without click goes to the audience. So what we are going to do at the end of this tutorial, this tutorial was basically about how to prepare a backing track for live performance. In the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to import it into a software and use that in an easy manner, and how to set up your sound card outputs so that it all happens without much of a problem. So actually that's the easiest part of this. I think if you can spend some time on making really solid backing tracks, the aim is, of course, your drummer needs to be very confident, needs to be able to drum along with that metronome, and more importantly, it sounds good. It sounds the way you truly want it to sound, which is why, as I mentioned, do a render with all the software running, with the tape machine, with the saturation, with the limiter, with pretty much all that you need to make it sound great, because you're trying to take your studio to the stage, and the best way to do that is just take it from the studio, directly from the source, which is the DAW. And another point to conclude with, this will definitely work on all DAWs. I use Pro Tools. I've seen people do it on Logic, on Reaper, on Ableton. I think it works on anything. The key is to get it to sound as good as you can and as comfortable as you can when you're monitoring it during a live show. So hope you guys found this tutorial useful. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'm going to show you how to bring all this stuff into another software called MainStage and set all this up, and with a click of a button, hopefully your song is good to go. Cheers.